Hi, good afternoon. My name is Katerina Woodcock. I'm an associate solicitor at Latitude Law, and I'm joined by my colleague Callum, a caseworker at Latitude. So today we're going to be talking to you about two specific visa categories. So that is the skilled worker route and the graduate route, two categories that you can switch into once you've completed your course of study in the UK. So firstly, we're going to look at work conditions and just the types of things you can do while you are still completing your degree. So as I'm sure some of you are aware, if you are in term time, you can complete up to 20 hours a week of employment. So that would be part-time work. And then you can complete full-time work during vacation or periods when you're not in completing your studies. So a lot of that is to do with your right to work in the UK. So employers should have some understanding of that, and they would check whether or not you have the right to work. That's normally done digitally. So they would check your right to work status online. And they would also need to check how many hours you are permitted to work during that period. And also, for example, checking your term times to see when you are in and not in full-time study. So that's just part of the work conditions as a student, and there's a few other ways in which you can complete full-time work, such as a postgraduate doctor or dentist, and as a student union sabbatical officer for up to 2 years when permission is granted for this purpose. As again, I'm sure you're aware, you cannot complete self-employed work or engage in any business activity unless you're waiting for a decision on an application such as a startup, which has been endorsed by HEP, or if you can't work as an entertainer or professional sportsman, and you also can't fill a full-time permanent position unless recognised unless as a recognised foundation programme or as a student union sabbatical officer. Just next slide, please. Sorry, slides are not. So if you are submitting a valid application, for example, under the graduate or the skilled worker route, the conditions slightly change for you in terms of your right to work in the UK. So if you've submitted a valid in-time application as a graduate, you can start your employment in a full-time permanent vacancy once you've completed the course. Again, you can also do that as a skilled worker following completion of the course. And just remember that a course isn't complete until all the relevant modules are complete, including your dissertation, and just, checking the conditions of your confirmation of acceptance of studies. And then now we're going to go on to the graduate route, which my colleague Callum will go into detail on. Callum?
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, as Kat mentioned, I'll be discussing today the graduate visa. Many of you might have heard of this before as called the post-study work visa. It's now called the graduate visa, which was introduced in July 2021. It's essentially an opportunity for all international students who have previously studied in the UK to essentially extend their leave for a further course, depending on what kind of qualification you've received. So generally it's for a further 2 years in the UK. But if you have received a PhD, you may be eligible for 3 years. It's important that you understand that graduates cannot extend their visa. It's essentially a one-time visa. And if you have previously held permission under the doctorate extension scheme, you will not qualify. Further to the point that it's a one-time visa, it doesn't lead to settlement. Unlike many other further visa applications, although slight consideration there can be made to the 10-year long residence visa application, essentially having held 10 years of continuous lawful residence in the UK through various visa options. The graduate visa will count towards that if you're looking to apply that way. So like with many visa applications, there's a variety of requirements which are split into validity, suitability, and eligibility. So I will we'll go through those in turn. So firstly, to address the validity requirements. Essentially, these cover the practicalities of making an application. So firstly, the correct online form must be submitted, and the correct application fees must be paid. Now, these application fees are split into two separate payments. Firstly, there is the application fee itself, which is £822. And then there's the immigration health surcharge. The immigration health surcharge is charged at £624 for adults, and that is per year of the visa that is requested. So if you are looking to submit for 2 years, it's 1,248, and if you are a PhD student looking for 3 years, it's £1,872. Consideration should be made that we're expecting that in January 2024 there will be quite a significant increase to the immigration health surcharge. So for adult applicants, that's going up to £1,035 per year of the visa, and for child applicants, that is increasing to £776 per year of the visa. So it is quite a significant increase. So if you are eligible to be looking to apply for the graduate route, you might want to consider that based on this upcoming increase to the immigration health surcharge fees. Once the application is submitted and relevant fees are paid, you would need to provide your biometric information. That can either be provided through the IDV app, if applicable, or by attendance at a UK VCAS approved centre, and an appointment at the approved centre. You should also provide all supporting evidence at this stage. That includes proving your identity and nationality. I'll come on in a little while to the the sort of types of documents that should be provided to meet all the requirements. So I'll talk about that a little bit, but sort of as a must, generally proving your identity and nationality is very important. It's important that you must know that you must be in the UK when you make this application, and you must hold or have last been granted permission as a student. So this is integral if you have completed your studies and wish to go back to your home country for a while. You will need to make sure that you are back in the UK to apply as a graduate, and you must make sure that you apply before your student visa expires. Okay. Just further to evidence, it's important that if you have received a scholarship or a sponsorship for fees in the past 12 months, that there is further evidence that you'll need to provide. Again, I'll come on to that in a little while. And then finally, a decision should be issued within 3 to 8 weeks of your biometric enrolment. That isn't really a service standard. It can take a little bit longer, but that's generally what we see. Unfortunately, there's no priority service as there is in other visa applications, where essentially you can pay an additional fee for an expedited service. Unfortunately, the graduate visa doesn't have that service. Okay. So suitability requirements. These essentially look at your character and conduct and any reasons why the Home Office may see fit not to grant you a graduate visa. Okay, so just to break it down into a few points here. Firstly, you must not be in breach of immigration laws or be on immigration bail. That goes back again to the point I mentioned about making sure you submit the application prior to your student visa expiring, and therefore that you are not overstaying your visa in the UK. You must not fall for refusal on the general grounds of refusal. So these look at points like criminality, i.e. if you have any past criminal convictions, if you have relied on any false documents or information or failed to disclose any material facts. That relates to both an application that you make as a graduate or any previous UK visa applications you may have made. There's also a point there about NHS debt. If you have got any NHS debt, that's over sort of £500, that would need to be fully paid in order to meet the suitability requirements. So it's worth just making sure if you have received any medical treatment in the UK that there isn't any outstanding NHS debt that needs to be paid. Okay, so the main points for meeting the graduate visa application generally come down to these eligibility requirements. It is a points-based system, so as with other things like the skilled worker route, that you have to meet these eligibility requirements to receive the required amount of points to be successful. Okay, so I'll address these all in turn. So firstly, to the successful course completion requirement. It's a requirement that the student must have previously been a student at a university, i.e. sponsor, that has a track record of compliance. The University of Lancaster is a provider that has a track record of compliance. So for those of you that are obviously students of University of Lancaster, there shouldn't be any issue there. You must then have successfully completed and studied the course during the last grant of permission of study. This is the sort of the more significant point about this requirement, is that the course has to be successfully completed. Okay, the university would notify UKVI that you've successfully completed the course, but again, so it's on the university in terms of whether they consider that the course is fully completed. Just a further point there, if there has been a change of course of study without making a fresh student application, the course of study that has to be completed is that second course of study that you've changed to. So if there has been any change of course of study, that's just something to consider. Okay, and the qualification requirement, this may sound similar to the previous one, although it is a bit more specific to the actual course. As you can see there, it's imperative that you must have completed a course of study that is either a UK bachelor's degree, UK postgraduate degree, or any other relevant qualification that's listed there. I won't go into all of them, but they are, like sort of one year course, like a law conversion or legal practice course, something like that. You must have made sure that you've secured that qualification during that last grant of leave, last grant of student permission. Okay. A slight thing just to note there, if there is anybody who has undertaken the student union sabbatical officer role, you must have completed your student permission that was held prior to holding permission under that SUSO permission role. Okay, studying in the UK. So this very much does look on the length of the course that you've been on, specifically whether it's for a course that's longer than 12 months or less than 12 months. If the length of the course is for 12 months or less, you must have studied in the UK for the full duration of that course. If the course is for longer than 12 months, then you only need to have studied for 12 months throughout that entire course of study in the UK. So it's one 12-month period. Now, many of you may have been affected by travel restrictions caused by COVID-19. And so if there has been any distance learning throughout that period that's restricted you from traveling to the UK, there is a concession period. As you can see, with regards to those particular dates. The particular dates being 24th of January 2020 to 30th of June 2022. For those, specifically for those that are meeting that have got a 12-month course or less, you can still meet the requirement if prior to 21st of June 2021 you started that course and you entered the UK on or before the 27th of September 2021 as a student. If you've begun the course for 12 months, that's 12 months or less between 21st of June 2021 and 30th of June 2022, provided that you've entered the UK on or before 30th of June 2022, you will still meet the requirement. For those courses lasting longer than 12 months, if there's been any distance learning between that specified period, then that will be overlooked. There doesn't need to be any sort of date of arrival requirement for you to meet that. So if you are affected at all by restrictions of travel due to COVID, and there had to be sort of distance learning, then it's worth taking note of those, of these particular periods that is a concession. So it's just worth noting that. Okay, so just in terms of if you are successful for being granted a graduate visa, as I mentioned before, most will be granted a period of leave for 2 years, but that can be increased to 3 years if you have a qualification that is a PhD or some other doctoral qualification. Okay. Throughout the graduate visa, you are able to undertake employment. You are able to be self-employed and to undertake voluntary work. This is obviously one of the more important points, and I think the biggest benefit of the graduate visa. I'll come on to that in a little while, but it is that's certainly a big point. You must note that you can't work as a professional sports person. You will not have access to public funds. You can study, but the course that you intend to study cannot be suitable for sponsorship as a student. Again, if you're successful, you may receive a BRP. The UK Visa and Immigration are looking to digitize visa confirmation from January 2025. We are starting to see that some graduates are not receiving a BRP, so it seems that it's starting to be phased out. So it's worth noting that if you do make applications now, you may not receive a BRP, although some have in the past. So it certainly looks like it's starting to be phased out in time for this the full move in January 2025. Okay, just a brief point here on family members. If you have got any partners or children that are looking to apply, they are able to. There's some additional requirements that must be met. So for partners, specifically with regards to a relationship, you must be able to show that the relationship between the graduate and the partner is genuine and subsisting, and there must be an intention for them to live together in the UK throughout the graduate stay. Okay. They must also intend not to stay beyond that period, the period that is already granted to the graduate. And then on to children as well. They must be under the age of 18 at the date of the application. They must not be leading an independent life, and there must be suitable arrangements for their care and accommodation in the UK. Okay, I mentioned before I'd come over to the benefits of using the graduate route. As I said, I think the most important benefit of this route is it grants students the opportunity to extend their leave and get some experience in the UK job market. Particularly for those who have not been able to secure employment with an employer that is able to sponsor you through the skilled worker route. This really allows you to get some experience and potentially find an employer that might be able to sponsor you. So it's worth noting again that the graduate route does not count towards settlement, again with that concession that it does count towards 10 years of lawful resident. But you can switch into an alternative immigration category at any time. So this is, for instance, like a partner visa, or probably most relevant to most of you is moving into the skilled worker. So if, for instance, you had found employment, but you found employment with an employer that is unable to sponsor, they may wish to sponsor you down the line. So you could switch into the skilled worker route then, or if you found another employer that is able to sponsor, you're able to switch over to skilled worker, and you can do so at any time. I mean, it's worth considering if you want to do so, particularly if you're planning to settle in the UK, as if you move over to the skilled worker route, that is a route that leads to settlement after 5 years. So, if you have the opportunity to do so earlier, you might wish to do so to reach settlement as soon as possible. I mentioned also that we would just give you a brief idea of the sort of documents that you should provide. Valid passport is always very important for making any visa application. Your BRP, current BRP, if you hold one, your confirmation of acceptance of studies, if that's been provided to you, it's always useful to provide a copy of that as well. If you have any evidence of completing a qualification, for instance, a degree certificate or transcript, if they are held, then it is certainly useful to provide those. As I mentioned before, if you have had a scholarship or a sponsorship, it's important that the institution that's offered that scholarship or sponsorship should provide a letter to confirm that they consent to the application. And finally, just again on dependents there, if you've got any family that are applying as well, they would need to provide relevant ID, proof of relationship, and ideally proof of cohabitation in the UK with the graduate. Okay, so finally, just with regards to some frequently asked questions that we have had, I'll just touch on these briefly then. Can students submit a graduate application before they receive their final results? As I sort of mentioned, it is down to the sponsor or the university to notify the UKVI by the date of application that they've completed that they have completed the course. If UKVI have not received notification that it's completed, but the confirmation of the acceptance of studies confirms that it's an acceptable qualification, the UKVI can contact the university to ask for confirmation. It's just worth noting that that could cause some delay in getting a decision. So that's just worth noting there. Is it possible for students to be fully to have completed the course having not paid their fees? Short answer there, no. The university will be unable to confirm that the course is being completed without having all course fees paid. So again, that's definitely something to take note of. What if the name of the course has changed? Provided it's been done by the university and the course content has stayed the same, there shouldn't be any issue there. Might be worth checking with the university about that as well if you have any queries about that. What if someone studied abroad and didn't travel to the UK in accordance with the 27th of September 2021 or 30th of June 2022 deadlines? This is relevant to those with a course of 12 months or less. But really, if you haven't traveled to the UK at all during that period, then yeah, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to qualify for a graduate visa. And then finally, can someone undertake 2 periods of leave as a student union sabbatical officer after completing studies? Yes, they can, and you'd still be able to qualify for a graduate leave, provided that those 2 courses are consecutive. The 2 courses as an SUSO are consecutive. Okay, so that concludes the slides I have on graduate visa. So I'll pass you over to Katerina, who will discuss the skilled worker route.
Thank you so much, Callum. Thanks for going through that. So I'm going to discuss the skilled worker visa category. So this is a route that you can either switch into from being a student, and you can also switch from being a graduate. So just kind of following on from what Callum said, you can switch at any point within your graduate visa to the skilled worker route. You don't need to leave it until the full 2 years as a graduate. The quicker you do it, essentially, is when your 5 years to settlement starts. So if you did complete 2 years as a graduate, it wouldn't count towards your 5 years towards settlement as a skilled worker. So the quicker you do it, the better. But as Callum said, there are some positives and negatives to doing that. So as a graduate, you've got the ability to be self-employed, to work in kind of any role that you want to, whereas with the skilled worker route, you are just looking at working only for your sponsor. There are a few exceptions to that, which I'll go into in detail. So similar in terms of the graduate route, in terms of switching, especially the validity and suitability requirements. Eligibility is slightly different. So we just go on to the next slide, please, Callum. So the main thing in terms of validity is recently, I think it was July this year, the category changed slightly because we were seeing a lot of students switching while they were still in the course of study to the skilled worker route. I'm not sure why, but they saw this increase and decided to change the validity requirements slightly for people moving into the skilled worker route. So you do have to meet a couple, certain conditions depending on the type of study that you're completing in the UK. So condition A, this is for people that have last had permission as a student. The applicant must have completed a course of study for which the CAS was assigned. Or condition B, the applicant must have been studying a full-time course of study at degree level or above with a higher education provider. Obviously with Lancaster, that's valid application. And the certificate of sponsorship, so this is the certificate that will allow you to apply for a skilled worker visa that will be issued by your prospective sponsor. The certificate must not have a start date earlier than the completion of the course completion date. And then lastly, if you're completing a PhD, the applicant must be studying a full-time course of study leading to the award of a PhD. And the course must have, certificate of sponsorship must have a start date no earlier than 24 months after the start date of that course. And just a point to note with this as well, if you are, so say if you and your partner in the UK, both as students, and you're looking to, say if your partner's switching into the skilled worker category, this also applies to dependents of skilled workers. So if you are in the UK as a student and looking to switch to the dependent of a skilled worker route, you will have to meet these conditions as well. So you may have to wait until you've completed your course of study before switching to a dependent category. And just next slide, please. Thank you. So with the skilled worker eligibility requirements, there are 70 points in total that you need to meet, and 50 of those are mandatory. And I'll just go into each of those points in detail. So sponsorship is 20 points, job at an appropriate skill level is 20 points, English language, 10 points, and then you have 20 tradable points. So the mandatory points, so as I mentioned earlier, you would need to be provided with a certificate of sponsorship from a prospective sponsor who holds a Home Office skilled worker sponsor license. And if you're wondering, you know, who are these organisations that hold these types of licenses, there is a register on the Home Office website, which is quite a long Excel spreadsheet. I think there's about 70,000 registered sponsors at the moment, and that keeps going up. So there are quite a lot of organisations that may be able to offer you sponsorship. So you need to be issued with a certificate of sponsorship, and you'd also need to show that the offer of employment is genuine. So in terms of genuineness of the employment, you just need to show that, you know, you've found this job, for example, for a job search. There's no requirement to show how the job was obtained, but certainly showing the Home Office, this is more on the sponsor side, to show that this offer of employment is genuine and you will continue to work in the UK for the length of time of the certificate of sponsorship. Job at an appropriate skill level. So this is, there's a list again on the Home Office website of the types of roles that would be considered appropriately skilled to be considered for sponsorship. So that's under Appendix Skilled Occupation, and also Appendix Shortage Occupation List. And the Shortage Occupation List tends to be for roles that are based in science, engineering, construction, architecture, and there's a few other categories that are under the shortage occupation list, which I'll explain in a bit more detail. Some roles may require an ATAS certificate. This is quite limited. It tends to be for people that are working in, you know, various scientific and engineering roles, but again, kind of limited towards people working in like military research, things like that. So relatively limited. And then finally, an English language requirement. So fortunately, you're all, most of you are probably completing masters or undergraduate degrees or doctorates. So this type of certificate would suffice. And, you know, either certificate, transcript, or letter from the uni confirming the information that appears on the certificate. If you don't have these things for whatever reason, there are alternative qualifications. For example, an English language test that would need to be at level B1 for speaking, listening, reading, writing. And then finally, for example, if you have a degree from overseas that was taught in English, you may be able to get what's called ECTIS confirmation, that it's at the same level as if it was taught in the UK. Just tradable points. So the tradable points largely relate to the salary for individuals. So the standard is 26,200 per year, or £10.75 per hour, and then the going rates for the occupation code. So you can find that information online. It's on the Home Office website, but there are a couple of tradable points with this, and I'll specifically look at new entrant. So as you can see, if you're switching from the student route to the skilled worker routes, you may benefit from the new entrance rates, but there are some caveats to that in terms of your sponsor allowing a reduced salary. So for example, I am a student. I want to switch immediately after my completion of course of study to the skilled worker route. I'd only be allowed to be a new entrant for 4 years. So I'd only be able to be issued with a certificate of sponsorship for 4 years rather than 5 years as a new entrant. And obviously that limits, you'd have to then apply for a further 5th year to then apply for settlement. So it's just more and more visa applications. So you may just be looking at a full 5 years, just depending on, you know, the type of sponsorship that you're looking for. And also, if you are a graduate, as Callum mentioned, this would count as time towards being time as a new entrant. So, for example, you complete a full 2 years as a a new graduate, and then you wish to switch to the skilled worker route, your sponsor would only be allowed to employ you as a new entrant for a further 2 years. So it is, although it's beneficial in terms of allowing lower rates to be paid, there are certainly some caveats to that. So just be aware of that if you are looking to apply as a new entrant in that category. In the shortest occupation, just as above, 25, meet the 20,960 per annum or £10.75 per hour, and then 70% of the going rates for that occupation code, whichever is higher. And finally, the PhD in irrelevant subjects. This can be 23,580 per annum, £10.75 per hour, or 90% of the going rate for that occupation code. So it's good for you and your sponsor to check those going rates and see, what you can be paid and to come to an agreement on that. There are a couple of other reductions. It just depends on your qualification and the role that you're undertaking. And then the financial requirement. So this sometimes can be a bit tricky, but most of the time relatively straightforward. So if you've been in the UK for 12 months or more, this is automatically met. However, if you are going to leave the UK and then come back as entry clearance as a skilled worker, you'd need to show funds held, which are 1,270 for 28 days. However, your sponsor, when they issue a certificate of sponsorship to you, they can certify maintenance for you, and you then don't need to provide evidence of finances for that initial 28-day period. If the sponsor does certify maintenance, this applies to family members as well. And then finally, depending on the type of role that you'll be undertaking, you may require a criminal record certificate. So conditions of your immigration status as a skilled worker, you'll usually be granted between, it could be 1 year, it could be 5 years. It just depends on the amount of time that the sponsor wishes to sponsor you for. You do not have access to public funds, as with the graduate route. You can work in you can only complete the work that you're being sponsored to do. However, you can undertake supplementary employment, but there are some caveats on that. You can only complete work that's in the shortage occupation or in the same profession as your certificate of sponsorship, and that can only be up to 20 hours per week, so quite limited in what you can do there. You can undertake voluntary work and you can study as long as it doesn't interfere with your sponsored role. And as mentioned, 5 years in this route will lead to settlement in the UK and eventually citizenship if you wish to do so. So the documents that you need to provide, these are certainly less than some other visa categories, so quite limited in what you do need to provide, but certainly make sure you have all this information available to get a swift decision in your application. So your valid passport, biometric card, if that has been granted, as Callum mentioned, sometimes they're not being granted. So some kind of evidence of your immigration status, such as the letter which you may have received by email, confirmed by the Home Office, confirming your leave to remain in the UK. Certificate of sponsorship, so that is the certificate that this is the reason why this COS is issued, to then be used in your skilled worker application, and then the length of time on that document will determine how many years of leave to remain as a skilled worker you'll receive. And then the evidence of tradable points if you qualify, so if you're a new entrant, evidence of when you were previously studying, if you're a PhD, PhD certificate, financial requirement documents if you're required to show them if your sponsor's not going to certify maintenance for you, or if you haven't lived in the UK for over 12 months. English language requirement documents, so as I mentioned, either your degree certificate, transcripts, English language test, and then or confirmation from ECTIS about your degree overseas. Criminal record certificate depending on the role, and if it's a scholarship or sponsorship letter confirming their consent to allow you to switch into the skilled worker category. And then if you are applying with dependents, as I mentioned previously, so just proof of your relationship to them, for example, birth certificates for children or marriage certificates for partners, or evidence of cohabitation in the UK with unmarried partners. And then if any of these documents are in another language, just ensure they provide a certified translation along with that, that document. So just a few frequently asked questions. Is there a cap on the number of absences as a student? And while there are no set number of absences, as this is not a route to settlement in the UK, it's just important to remain within the conditions of your permission and sponsorship, as your university will expect attendance. Obviously, holidays and outside of term time, fine, it's understandable. What if I finish my course early? If your course has ceased or will cease before the end of the date recorded on the CAS, the UK may take steps to cancel leave, curtail leave, can leave you in a difficult situation. We would recommend you seek legal advice immediately if you are in that situation. And then just finally, in terms of having some kind of access to, how do I find a sponsor? How do I find some organisation that's able to sponsor me? Please contact your career services within the university. It's their job to help you with those types of issues. So just going back to, so these are kind of third options, and this is something that I enjoy kind of assessing with potential applicants, because you may find that there's a category that may be easier for you to meet in order to continue living in the UK, working in the UK. So the other options that may be available to you, you may be the family member of a British or settled migrant. So you may have the ability to switch to be sponsored by them. Again, certainly seek legal advice in respect of that and your eligibility to switch. The innovator founder route, relatively new routes. I haven't seen that many applications through this route recently, and you do need endorsement for a viable business plan. It needs to be innovative. It needs to be a business that's not currently trading. So certainly quite a lot of caveats there, and just you need to make sure you've got some kind of a business plan it's innovative and not currently trading. And you need endorsement, which is stage 1, and then looking to switch into that category, which is stage 2. Global talent, which is also a stage 1 and stage 2 process. So the global talent is for individuals that are considered to be exceptionally talented or have exceptional promise in the area. So this is under all sorts of categories. It's science, tech, film and television, people in the arts. So there's a few different external bodies that provide you with an endorsement to then switch in this category routes. What's interesting about this route is that you can stay in the UK while you're being considered for endorsement under global talent, but the difference is that you're not able to, if you don't have immigration status in the UK, you're not able to switch into this route. But if you have some form of leave, for example, as a graduate, there is the ability to switch. And most of the above are 5-year routes to settlement. Innovators 3 years, and global talent can be 3 years if you've got exceptional talents, and it's 5 years if you are on exceptional promise. So it just depends on your endorsement under the global talent visa category. So how we can help with with any kind of immigration issues that you may have. So we do offer a 30-minute free consultation. So if you just email lancaster-inquiries@latitudelaw.com, we can, we come back to you relatively quickly, let you know when one of our solicitors or caseworkers is available, and we can just go through your issues and just discuss what the best options are for you. And yeah, thank you so much for listening to Callum and I speak about the two visa routes today, and please let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. That's great. I really appreciate that, Katerina and Callum, for sharing your advice and tips with our audience. We've had a few questions come in. So the first question, we have many students who are studying a taught postgraduate master's program. if they don't fully pass the masters and are awarded a postgraduate certificate instead, would they still qualify for the graduate route visa?
Callum?
Sorry, just figuring out how to unmute myself there. I'm not sure on that one actually, Kat. Sorry.
I think that's something I'd need to look into as well. I've not come across that before.
So they're still getting a qualification. It's
Hmm.
not the original qualification that they were awarded the student visa for, because that was for a 12 months masters, but they're still coming out with a qualification, which is a postgraduate certificate. So I'm wondering, because there's a bit of mixed, if it's a yay or a nay.
I think leave that with us. It's not something we've come across, but it's a very good point. So I'm happy to provide some. I'll look into that further and then just come back to you with some detailed advice on that. That's because it is an interesting point. Just not something Callum and I have come across recently.
You'll find on these sessions we'll come across lots of different
it's good.
ones.
Yeah, it's good to check.
Great, thank you. And then let me just double check this question. So another question came in. So what if the decision on the graduate visa comes after the student visa expiry date? What should someone do? Are they required to leave the UK before the visa expiry date on their student visa and come back after getting the graduate visa, or can they stay while the graduate visa is in process?
Okay, so what happens with that? If your visa is granted after the expiry of your leave to remain as a student, you have what's called Section 3C leave in the UK, and that just allows people to continue residing in the UK on the basis of their previous immigration status. So that would have been as a student. Once you've submitted an application to the Home Office in country, it's not advisable to leave the UK while a decision is being made on that application. Obviously, your visa will expire potentially during that period anyway. So you will wait for a decision, but you will have subsisting leave to remain on your previous visa while you're waiting for a decision on the new visa.
Great, thank you.
You're able to evidence that as well. You know, you can get like a temporary evidence of right to work in the UK. Just for people specifically in that that type of category.
Brilliant, thank you. So there's a question around the graduate route visa and what you can do on the graduate route visa in terms of work, and specifically because we do have a lot of entrepreneurial minded students, can they be a freelancer on the graduate route visa?
So in terms of just being completely self-employed, yes, you can undertake self-employed work as a graduate. That's the kind of beauty of this type of visa category. It is relatively new and it works. So you can be employed, self-employed. You have much more flexibility under this sort of temporary category. So yes, you are able to undertake self-employed work.
Brilliant. And then this comes back to the part that you were talking about dependents and whether marriage is the only circumstance in which you can bring a partner on a dependent visa to the UK. So if somebody's in a long-term relationship but they're not married, can that individual still be brought to the UK as a dependent, or do they have to be married?
So there are some, you are able to apply as an unmarried partner. You would need to show cohabitation with that partner for at least 2 years. So it can be a bit more difficult when you're providing that information from overseas, because you need to show, that you were living together previously, and then if it's in a different language, you need to show evidence that that information that you're providing to the Home Office is genuine. So certified translation of any kind of documentation that confirms cohabitation. So you're able to do so, but I think the evidence requirement is a bit more stringent.
Brilliant. The next question is around the indefinite leave to remain. So if a student successfully gets a skilled worker visa, works in the UK for 5 years and applies for indefinite leave to remain, as long as they've met the conditions of UKVI, will that generally be approved, or is there a quota or any hidden terms in which they may be denied application?
No, I mean, if they meet the conditions of appendix skilled worker, there should be no reason why their application would be refused. You know, unless there's any compliance issues, for example, if you're no longer sponsored or no longer required in that role, that may cause some issues. But apart from that, there's no, as far as I'm aware, there's no quota on how many skilled worker visas are to be granted. Indefinitely to remain applications are to be granted.
Brilliant. Another question's come in. I think this is something I can answer as well. And it kind of comes back on that similar question that you're going to investigate, Katerina. So if a student's failed a module, will this be a problem in getting the graduate visa? And I don't think UKVI go down into the level of modules, do they? It's as long as you've passed the program, successfully completed the program of study, there is no issue with the graduate route. So I think overall, if you pass your program and you get awarded your degree or your master's, there is not an issue.
I don't think that would be an issue. I think, Callum, are you in agreement with that? It's all about,
provided
quite limited with the information they provide. So
provided that the university can confirm that the course is successfully completed, then you'd meet that requirement. You know, as you mentioned, I don't think that they would go as far into individual modules like that, as you just need confirmation that it's successfully completed.
Thank you. And I think if that, and you can say no, because I understand we're up against it in time, but we have been asked if you could go back to the trading points section of the PowerPoint, and if you could just summarize that again, because I think a couple of the students felt it was slightly complicated. So if you're happy to summarize that.
Is there anything specifically about the tradable points that they were unsure about?
I think it was just if you could go through it again. I think
okay, that's fine. So I think the new entrant bit is confusing for me. Never mind for students. So absolutely. So yes, with new entrants, there's the guidance states that you can only have 4 years as a new entrant. So moving from the from the student routes to the graduate routes, you could only have 4 years as a new entrant on that, lower new entrant rate, either 20,960 or £9.75, £10.75 per hour, or 70% of the going rate of that occupation code. So it just limits the amount of time you're able to do that. So you may be able to apply for a 4-year certificate of sponsorship on that lower salary, and then you'd need to extend your visa for a further year to bring you up to 5 years as a skilled worker to then settle on the skilled worker route. With the shortage occupation, I'll just go a bit further into that. So the new entrant, if you're a graduate, if you've been a graduate for 1 year and then you're switching into the skilled worker route, you can only have 3 years as a skilled worker. So it's just about the length of time that you've either been on the skilled worker route or a graduate then switching to the skilled worker route. So it's just keeping a log of how long you've been on those routes, and then speaking with your sponsor, just explaining. That's why we say, you should seek legal advice. The sponsor should seek legal advice, because it can get quite complicated on new entrant issues. Shortage occupation. So these are just roles in the UK that the UK labour market are struggling to fill, which is why they've allowed the salary to be lower, whether that's on the shortage occupation list. So the going rate is lower for the occupation code, and the salary is also lower. So it only applies to certain categories, as I mentioned, science, engineering, construction, architecture, care workers. It's a bit of a political point, the shortage occupation at the moment, because the fact that you're able to employ people on a lower rate as a skilled worker. But yeah, those are the rules at the moment, and that's what students are able to switch into if they're able to find a occupation in that code. And then the PhD. So if you hold a PhD, and you're looking to switch, it just allows your sponsor a bit more flexibility with the salary that they're able to pay you.
Thank you. And it does get slightly complicated, and we do also advise students that even if it looks completely straightforward in terms of job offer and what you're doing, do seek advice, because it goes down as well, doesn't it, Katerina? So the number of hours sometimes can be on the contract can be an issue depending on salary. So I have put in the chat, and just let me know that you can all see it, thumbs up, or just say yes in the chat area. I've put a link to the Ask portal, just to say where the Latitude Law information is. So when you go onto that page, you just scroll down a little bit. Don't worry that it's on the alumni pages. It's open to all students. And you can scroll down and you'll find all the information on how to contact Latitude Law, as well as the terms and conditions as well. So just so that we know everyone has seen that. Great. Let me just see. So this is again related kind of to the indefinite leave to remain. So to get those 5 years to apply for indefinite leave to remain, essentially, can you mix the visas up? So if you had 2 years on the skilled worker visa and then you were on a spousal visa, does that add up to the 5 years, or is it does the spousal visa contribute?
In some ways, yes and no. If you're moving from one points-based category to another, for example, if you were moving from the skilled worker routes to the global talent routes, then you're able to add those years together. With kind of switching, as long as you continue to have leave to remain in the UK, you would be able to add up all those years. For example, you're here as a student, and then you were here for a skilled graduate, and then a skilled worker, and then you switch to a family route. As long as you continue to have subsisting valid leave to remain in the UK for a period of 10 years, and you've not had a lot of absences outside the UK, you'll be able to apply for settlement based on long residence. So it just depends. As long as you continue to have valid leave to remain, and depending on your visa category, you should be able to settle in the UK.
Thank you. And that's all the questions. Really appreciate you sharing all that information today, because I know it's a lot for our students to take in, but it's, you've delivered it in such a way that it's really accessible. And I think it's really important as well to know what your options are when you're making those career decisions, whether it's, going home or staying in the UK, and visas is a huge part of that career decision making. So thank you so much to Katerina and Callum for sharing your insights and your expertise. Apologies for the alarm that's just gone off outside as I was speaking. The recording will be available. Again, I've shared it in the chat, the LUMS Careers YouTube channel. So all of our recordings are available on there for any online events that we run. So you'll find that it'll take about 5 days to edit the video and have it available on YouTube, but it will be on there by the end of next week. So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you Katerina and Callum, and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks so much.
Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Thank you.